provided Form I-9 presentations to the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands in December 2009. He currently serves as a main contact for 100 ICE image special agents in regard to the Form I-9 and E-Verify. He has presented in over 35 states and territories to audiences ranging from elected officials, human resources, to payroll specialists, and immigration attorneys. Dave served in the U.S. Army Infantry. His military service decorations include the Legion of Merit. Dave is originally from West Virginia, but now makes his home in historic Fredericksburg, Virginia. We are thrilled to have Dave Basham. He really talks in layman terms to help you and your teams understand what you need to know about Form I-9. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the controls and the presentation to Mr. Basham, and we'll get started with the real deal with the I-9.
Hey, thanks a lot, Debbie, and I appreciate the intro and the opportunity to come back and give this presentation again in regards to what I call, as you see here on the screen, the real deal on the I-9. And also a thanks and shout out to I-9 Advantage as a whole. Before we get started, let me tell you a couple things. First of all, this is not going to be your run-of-the-mill presentation, bland, and he's just going to tell me the basic things, etc. Hey, we're not going to talk just about the icing on the cake. We're going to get down and cut the cake, and I'm going to show you some ingredients. So I would encourage you to jot down as many of these tidbits as possible. That can certainly help you and allow you to put these into effect immediately in regards to your I-9 process. I would like to say right off the bat, many people fill out the Form I-9 and go, oh, yeah, it's a requirement. I need to fill it out. It's no big deal. But you know what? If you look on Google and you simply were to Google, hey, companies fined after an I-9 audit, you're going to see some significant fines that come out of ICE. ICE is our sister agency, Immigration Customs Enforcement, and it's their responsibility to go out and do the audits on the I-9s. So take a look at those if you go, hey, it's no big deal if we miss something, because there can be some serious fines. So let's go ahead and jump into today's session. You see the agenda, and we'll talk about the background. I can't always assume that everyone that's jumped on this webinar is a seasoned individual in regards to the I-9. Some of you may have just been delegated this duty or new to it, or, hey, I need to find out a little bit more of my responsibilities. We'll look at completing the Form I-9. Yep, I'm going to go over each block. I'm going to tell you some of those ins and outs that you may not be aware of. We'll talk about storage and retention, and then we'll wind down with some resources and close out with some questions and answers and some additional information from I-9 Advantage. So our background, hey, the birth year of the I-9, 1986. Specifically, anyone that was hired after November 6, 1986, the employer needed to complete an I-9 on that individual. You see some additional information we provide in regards to IRCA. And Section 274, these employment verification provisions are found in Section 274 of the INA. Many of you that have worked around the I-9 for a period of time and are used to looking at our handbook in regards to instructions or guidance on completing the I-9, also known that we label that as the M274, and that's where that number came from. So working in the U.S., who can legally work in the U.S.? You see here are 4 groups, and when we talk about those non-citizen nationals, those are individuals like from America, Samoa. Look at that employment verification. What's the purpose? To verify the identity employment authorization of those documents of employees hired after November 6, 1986. Look at that second comment there. You need to complete and retain that I-9 for each employee that was hired after November 6, 1986. Now let's go into that for a second. If you've had an individual that has been working for you, let's say since December 1st, 1986, and they're still working for you, you better have that I-9 on file for them. If you go, oops, I don't, what do I do? We're going to talk about what to do in the event that you find out that you're missing an I-9. Many of you may feel, whoa, Dave, I thought after 3 years that we could go ahead and shred it. We're going to talk about the retention form of that I-9 once an employee is no longer working for your company. So hang tight with those, okay? And obviously, you need to refrain from discriminating against individuals based on various statuses. Preventing discrimination. You see the provisions of the INA prohibit 4 types of unlawful conduct in regards to discrimination on the I-9, and you might wonder, well, who oversees that? Who enforces that? Well, you see here on your screen, that's the Office of Special Counsel. We work very close with them. They're with the Department of Justice. We do a webinar with them generally each month. And if I can draw your attention, look at that employer's number down there. That second number ends in 8155. I would highly recommend that you circle that for those that have never utilized the services of OSC. If you ever feel that your written policy, your verbal standard operating policy, maybe leading up to today's webinar, and more so after today's session, you go, boy, are we treading on that gray area of discrimination in regards to how we process and handle and complete the I-9 and or E-Verify with any of our hires? You can pick up the phone and call the Office of Special Counsel. Look down below. You can remain anonymous. When you dial that number, you're going to talk to either one of their attorneys or one of their investigators. They rotate on that helpline. They're not going to ask you your name, your phone number, your NAICS code, your city, any of that. You pick up the phone and you can ask your question and they can give you some guidance. Further, let me go one step further. If you're about to fire or let somebody go in regards to the I-9 or E-Verify, I would certainly, if I was in your shoes, pick up the phone and call the Office of Special Counsel. Bounce it off of them. So it's a great free service, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of trying to utilize Office of Special Counsel. Let's look at completing the form. Yes, the Form I-9 was revised back in 2013. Yep, went from 1 page to 2. You may be asking, Dave, why did you go to 2 pages? Well, for a couple reasons. Number one, made the Form 508 compliant. Yeah, in the government, it means certain fonts, colors, certain size of lettering. For those that have worked around the I-9 in the past, I think you would attest that, hey, Dave, y'all's font used to be very small. So yeah, we had to enlarge that. That reason alone had it roll over from 1 page to 2 pages. We added some additional blocks and some additional areas on the I-9, and we're going to go over each one of these blocks. Let me talk about this for a second. One of the most common questions, or one of the top questions that we always get is, Dave, when we run off the I-9, it's actually 9 pages. What do we need to file? You know, you only need to file those pages where you're putting pen to paper. You don't have to file all the instruction pages with them. You don't have to file that last page, which is the list of acceptable documents. The only thing that you need to file is what you see here on the screen. Now, that goes one step further. We get the question, well, Dave, when I give the employee the I-9 to fill out, can I just give them these 2 pages and that list of acceptable documents? No. You're supposed to give them the instruction pages too. Now, don't fret. I know you're thinking, wow, Dave, you mean every time I have a new hire, I need to run off 9 pages and give it to them? Well, there's nothing to say after you haven't completed that I-9 with the employee. If they no longer want those first 6 pages of instructions, won't you go ahead and just retain those and utilize those again with your next new hire, okay? So let's go ahead and continue on and go into completing the I-9. So let's look at some basic requirements. As I stated, you need to have a Form I-9 on file for all your current employees. The only exception are those employees that you hired on or before November 6, 1986. So if you hired Dave back in September of 1986, and I'm still working for you, you don't have to have an I-9 on me. Why? For lack of better terms, I was grandfathered in. Let's talk about this last paragraph, and I want to put a lot of emphasis on this, seeing that remote hires are becoming more prevalent in the employment community in the U.S. Let me give you an example, and let's talk about this paragraph first. You can delegate the authority to complete the I-9 to a responsible agent, however you retain the liability for any errors. Denise Ann Up in Michigan, she hired me, and I live in Virginia. She hired me, Dave, in Virginia, and I'm going to be the sales rep for their company in the Northern Virginia and D.C. area. Calls me up on the phone, offers me a job. I accept it. I'm never going to go up to Michigan. Denise Ann has her HR firm, HR section, send down my hiring packet, my W-2 and tax forms and all that paperwork, and the I-9. So who's going to complete the I-9 on behalf of I-9 Advantage? You, the company, Denise Ann's company, can delegate that authority, meaning anyone complete Section 2 on her behalf, on her company's behalf. Yes, you can do that, just as the paragraph says, delegate the authority. But you need to know that you retain the liability for any errors that that individual makes. Now, many times we get calls from companies going, hey, we're going to have some hires out of state. We want somebody else to complete Section 2 for us. Hey, USCIS, can you provide us a list of companies, or who do you recommend? We don't have a list of companies. We don't recommend to anyone specifically. Whether you want to go to a librarian, an attorney, a notary, etc., that's your call. But just note, once again, you retain the liability for any errors that they make. Let's look at those exceptions to completing the I-9. You see here on the screen those individuals that are not required to complete the I-9. See that second one there, those independent contractors? We're not talking just about that contractor that maybe is coming to build that deck or the garage under your house. You know, many of you may have hired a contractor. Maybe they're a 1099 employee. Yes, the majority of those 1099 employees don't have to, you wouldn't have to do an I-9 on them. I'm not saying 100% because it really gets down to the relationship that your company has with that employee, and that's where your legal counsel or your senior HR director, CEOs, would define that for you. And anytime you hear me use the term today, the United States, we're not only talking the 50 United States, but here in District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. You may see them referred to as the CNMI on our screens. They were federalized back in 2009, and they had their own I-9 form that they were able to fill out for a 2-year period. Now, they use the current Form I-9 that you see. Hey, let's look at the list of acceptable documents. Here we go. There's nothing that has changed from the previous version's list of acceptable documents, meaning there was no documents added on, nor was there any taken away. But there were a couple changes here. And when I say changes, really additions to some of the wording. There are 2 of them. One of the areas was List A, number 5. We just added some more wording in there for you. It's not new wording. It was in the M274. But we put it here on the list of acceptable documents. The second area is List C, number 1. That Social Security card. Hey, we added some additional information in there. Now remember, the list of acceptable documents, it's this page right here that you should provide to the employee and ask them that they need to provide one from List A or one document from List B coupled with one document from List C. Don't answer if they ask, well, this is new to me. What's the most common documents people provide? You better be very careful on that. Remember that discrimination issue with Office Special Counsel? If you're guiding them toward a document to provide, or you're telling them what to provide, that can get you in trouble. So just simply, in an instance where you get a question like that, I would just simply reply back, say, we can't answer that. By law, we show you what the list of acceptable documents are, and you can choose one from List A and one from B and C. Okay, let's look at each section here. Let me back up one screen. Okay, let's look at Section 1. Section 1 makes up the whole first page. In the first part of Section 1, is the generic information in regards to that employee. The employee and the employee only fills out Section 1. Your responsibility as the employer in regards to Section 1 is that the employee fills out Section 1. See if I back that up one. Trying to back up, ladies, if you can help me out. Can't go back. Maybe they can get me back one. But your responsibility in Section 1 is just that they complete it. You're not validating. You're not assuring that thank you very much. You're not ensuring, hey, if they write their Social Security number down here, that you're going to ask them, I need to see your Social Security card. I need to validate that that is your number. You're not validating any of that information. That's where you're going to be doing that in Section 2. So in Section 1, the employee fills out their last name, their first name, their middle initial, other names if used. Other names if used, is it mandatory? No. Their address, no P.O. boxes, street address, city, town, state, zip, date of birth. Look at the date of birth. What's changed in that, the way we have that wording, or that date period, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 4-digit year? We've put that format in there versus the previous version where we just put date of birth. Now don't fret if you go, oh no. Individuals have not been using that format when they put in their date of birth. If you look in the M274, and you're going to see me driving you to that, because I want you to look in the M274 on some of these issues. It'll tell you that as long as the date that they provide in there is easily identifiable, don't worry about you having to correct that, having to be incorrect if it's not in that format. So if I was to put, just write SEP for September 7, 1978 there, and it's not 0901 1978. You don't have to worry about that, okay? Social Security number. Let me ask you, is that a mandatory field? No, it is not. Little asterisk there. For those of you that are enrolled in E-Verify, yes, it is. But we're not talking about E-Verify today. We're talking about the I-9. So if you're not enrolled in E-Verify, the Social Security number is optional. Now, many of you might say, well, hold on, Dave. I need their Social Security number for payroll purposes. Don't confuse other HR responsibilities and needs and requirements with the I-9. Email address and telephone number. Yep, those are two new blocks that we put on this version of the I-9 that we didn't have on the others. Why did we add it? Realizing that everybody in the workplace today is not working under one roof or at one location. But you have all your I-9s assembled and filed and done and reviewed, maybe a quality assurance check before you file them away. If you see that there's an issue with an I-9, you need to talk to that employee. If they put their email address or telephone number, which, by the way, are optional fields, if they put those in there, that gives you a quick and easy means to reach out and talk to them. Once again, they are not fields that have to be completed. Those are optional fields. Now, you might say, well, Dave, which ones, if they don't have to put it in there, you said, well, they don't want to put anything in other names used. They don't want to put their Social Security number in. They don't want to put an email address or telephone number. Which ones do we have to write in a, must we? This is your homework. I say that because I have a 6-year-old granddaughter, and I have helped her with some homework on several nights. I'm starting to use that word again. Go run off those instructions of the I-9. Those first 2 pages will talk about each block and say, if there's nothing to be put in this block, you may put NA. You can put A. You must put NA. Highlight those and review those instructions with anyone that has their hands in the I-9 process there within your company. I'm going back and stressing those audits again. You heard me mention a while ago ICE, our sister agency. Here at USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, and I'm specifically here in the verification division, it's our division here that actually developed the I-9, the M274. We make the revisions to it. E-Verify. These are our items. They're housed here. But it's our sister agency, once again, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. That's the enforcement arm on the I-9. When they come in and do an audit, for those of you who haven't had an audit, they're going to come in, they're going to give you a notice, generally a 3-day notice saying, hey, within 3 days we're going to come back. We want, and they'll give you a list of items. They want all your I-9s and your this, etc. And when they go check those I-9s, if they see any errors on them, they're either going to be substantive or technical. One of them is going to be a write-up, the other, like a slap on the hand. The other one's going to cost you money. So take this very seriously. And like I say, if you were to go on Google, companies find after an I-9 audit, you would see here several years ago, and I won't say exactly who the company is, but if you were to go into a mall, they were a clothing store, and they're still in business, that after an I-9 was completed on that company, there was over $1 million fine. Now, I am not telling you any of this to go, oh my gosh, he's trying to scare us and this and that. I'm not. What I'm trying to tell you is take the I-9 form serious, make sure that you're completing it correctly, and have that compliance program, that training program there within your company that with anyone that has their hands in the I-9 process to make sure that should you have an I-9 audit, that it should go rather smooth. So it's complete in section 1. Down about middle page of that section 1, that first page, is the employment attestation block. That's completed by the employer as well. Look on the left-hand side where we have those 4 blocks they can choose from. The employee chooses one of those blocks. They're either a citizen of the United States, a non-citizen national, etc. We say one because, granted, I do a lot of presentations, as I said, with Office of Special Counsel and with some of those ICE agents. And I always talk to the auditors for the ICE, and I go, hey, what are some of the wild things you see on the I-9? And I always get a chuckle when they say, hey, Dave, an individual checked off that all 4 blocks, they attest to being all 4 of those. So they just attest to being one. Look at that 3D barcode off to the right. Do not write in a space. Don't worry about that. Just act like it's not there. You go, well, then, Dave, why'd y'all put it in there? When a government form is approved, it's got to go through various agencies and et cetera before it's finally approved. Somebody in USCIS knows that we're going to use a barcode on this form somewhere down the line, or that's the plans. So we incorporated it in this version, but there's nothing you need to do. Don't line through it. You don't need to put in A or whatnot. Once again, don't even worry about it. You're going to see it on the second page as well. Signature of employee and their date. Hey, for those of you, once again, that have worked around the I-9, you probably were glad to see that there's writings, there's a sentence that goes right above that block. Why? Because on the previous version of the I-9, individuals would sign outside the box, signature of employee. So there shouldn't be a question where the employee signs. And once again, you see the date, format, period. Once again, don't fret if they don't put it exactly in that format, as long as, once again, if you go to the M274 and you look on the instructions, it'll tell you that as long as that date is easily identifiable, you'll be good to go. Look at that last sentence there on the screen. All employees must complete section 1 no later than the first business day of employment for pay. This is the first time you start seeing us talking about completion of an area and first business day of pay and whatnot. So let's take a second and back up here. When's the earliest you can complete an I-9 on a new hire? When's the earliest? A lot of employers feel, well, Dave, that's the first day they show up for pay. And that's really not the correct answer. The correct answer is, once you've offered an individual employment, they've accepted that job, anytime from that date, but no later than 3 business days after the employee started working for pay, you can complete the I-9. Now let me give you an example. Denise Ann called me, offered me that sales job down here in D.C., Virginia on 1 January. Hey, Dave, how would you like the job? And I go, sure do. Offered me, and I accepted on 1 January. But she said, hey, Dave, for payroll purposes, we're not going to have you start working until 1 February. I go, good to go. Let's say for some reason today, here the 29th, I just happen to be up in Michigan. And I just take a walk into Denise Ann's office, and while I'm in there, they go, hey, Dave, how would you like to fill out a lot of your new hire paperwork and all? I go, sure, not a problem. Maybe one of those forms of the I-9. Can we complete the I-9 here today, the 29th of January? I'm not starting work for pay until the 1st. Yes. Why? Once again, I've been offered and accepted that job. So I can complete Section 1 here today, filled out, signed, and dated. Denise Ann then could show me the list of acceptable documents, and maybe I have my passport on me, because we all walk around with a passport in our pockets, right? Just joking, but maybe I provide a List A document, a passport. Denise Ann fills out Section 2. She signs and dates it today. She saw my passport today, the 29th. But in that block, in Section 2, the date where he's going to start working for pay, she puts 1 February. Yes, you can put a future date in there. Okay? So that's to show you how early you can complete an I-9. Now let's come back to this last sentence here. All employees must complete Section 1 no later than the first business day of employment. So we understand in reality, hey, Dave, he's from the government. He's not in the real world. We don't see employees until generally the first day working for pay. We understand that, but I wanted to show you how you can complete it earlier. But on that first day, maybe that's the day that first time you see the employee, that employee has to complete Section 1 no later than that first business day. Now you might say, hey, Dave, I'm confused with 1 business day, and then you said the form has to be completed no later than 3 business days afterward. Don't confuse Section 1 with having the whole form completed. I, the new employee, need to complete Section 1 on no later than the first day I started working for pay. You, the employer, have up to 3 business days after I started working for pay to complete Section 2. Okay? We're going to touch on this a little bit more. Granted, I took a little bit of time on that, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about that. Here's the last portion on the first page of the I-9, the Prepare and Translator Certification. What is it? Well, it's pretty much defined in the title. If you're going to help an individual prepare the I-9 or translate information because maybe their English is not their first language, and you translate it, you're going to help them, and when you put pen to paper, it's going to be on this form right here, then you need to fill out Prepare a Translator Certification. You know, I've had companies go as far as to go, hey, Dave, we've really started to do a self-audit on our I-9s. They're chicken scratch. We can't read them. So what we've started doing is every time a new hire comes in, we send them over here to John or Betty because both of them have very legible, clear handwriting. And they sit down, and we have them actually put the pen to paper on the I-9, but we have them fill out the Prepare Translator Certification block. Dave, is that okay? Yeah, it is. That's not a problem. Seeing I use the term certification or translator, let me ask you this. How many I-9s can be used in the United States today? You know, there's actually 2. One is the English version you see here. The second version is a Spanish version. But it can only be used in Puerto Rico, meaning pen to paper in Puerto Rico. That's not to say that you can't use the Spanish version for an individual to read because maybe that's their primary language, but when you put pen to paper, it has to be on the English version. This completes Section 1. Let's go ahead and go into Section 2. Hey, here's the second page. You know, when this draft I-9 came out here in the Verification Division, they pulled about 6 or 7 of us together. There's several hundred of us here on this one floor, and ask us, hey, review this new version of the I-9. And when I was part of that team, and when I did, I asked myself as a speaker for the I-9 and messaging it, hey, where do I think that employers are going to make the most mistakes on this new version of the I-9? And here it is, right up top, and we've got a red rectangle around it. Make sure that you, the employer, are filling out the last name, first name, and the middle initial. Why do I think those are going to be the most common mistakes? Because you, the employer, haven't had to do that on previous versions. So that first page, section 1, that's the employee to fill out. Your baby is here, section 2, page 2. You'll see in list A, there's 3 blocks now. Yep, we used to have 2, but we added a 3rd block. Why? For those of you that are in institutions of higher learning, colleges, universities, etc., you're familiar with an individual with a CVIS number. We come over from another country and they've got various documents. He would put a 3rd document because there may be times where you need to provide that 3rd document as a list A. Questions we get on, hey Dave, in the issuing authority, can we just put DMV for a driver's license, division motor vehicles, or can we just put SSA? Let me tell you this, you can never go wrong if you spell out what that issuing authority is. Now, is it fair to say in the United States if somebody puts SSA or SSN card, Social Security Administration, Social Security number? Yes. But if you're going to use an acronym that may be very common in your region, your area, your state, but not for me down here in Washington, D.C. or Virginia, you need to rethink that, okay? Here's that 3D barcode again. Don't worry about that. Hey, here, see down toward the bottom, that's where you're going to put that date where the individual starts working for pay. Yes, that can be a future date. For those of you that are on the line that work in the temp agency, the staffing agency, many of you ask, well, when can we put a starting date for an individual? I come into a staffing company, I'll show them my resume. They go, oh, you're a speaker? Yes, we're going to have a job for you, Dave. But we don't have it readily available. But yes, we're going to put you in this ready pool over here. We're just waiting for your job to start. You can go ahead and utilize that date where you can go ahead and complete the I-9 on me and work from there. Remember here, as you see on the screen, the I-9 needs to be completed here, Section 2, no later than 3 business days after the employee begins working for pay, meaning your business days. If I started working for on Monday, and your company is open Monday through Friday and closed on Saturday and Sunday, my first day working for pay is Monday. When does the I-9 need to be complete to be compliant? Many people think, oh, that's easy, Dave. 3 days after you start working for pay, Monday, Tuesday, oh, by close of business Wednesday, Dave. The actual answer is Thursday. Listen to the key words there and look here on the screen. 3 business days after the employee starts working for pay. After Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If that first day I start working for pay for your company is Thursday, remember you're closed on Saturday and Sunday, then when would that I-9 need to be complete to be compliant? That would be Friday, Monday, by the close of business Tuesday. To close out this screen, look, employers must examine original documents. The only document doesn't have to be an original, can be a certified birth certificate. I am hitting those too quick. See if I can back up here. Here we go, examining documents, genuineness, and photocopies. We don't expect you here at USCIS to be a document expert. The only 2 things the M274 says is that you need to accept the document if it reasonably appears. Once again, go to the screen. Does the document look genuine and does it relate to the individual presenting it? If it does, then you need to accept it. If you go, well, hold on now, I've taken some training on documents and there's certain ones we're not going to accept. Hey, remember those policies I talked about in the beginning? Hey, if you're questioning or wondering about some of those policies you have in regards to completing I-9, if you're discriminating or pushing the gray button there, hey, pick up the phone and call the Office of Special Counsel. Once again, the documents must be original, no photocopies acceptable, except for a certified birth certificate. You can accept that. Hey, here on your screen is a receipt rule. Some of you may have dealt with a receipt in regards to the I-9. Some of you may haven't. So let's talk about it a little bit. Receipts can be used as temporary proof, going back up here on the first line of the screen, of employment eligibility when a list A, B, or C document has been lost, stolen, or damaged. That means they had the document, but they lost it. It means it had already been issued to them. Real scenario, real life. Here about a year and a half ago, I lost my driver's license in Virginia. I had to go to the DMV. In Virginia, we call it the DMV, Division of Motor Vehicles. I had to pay $20, fill out the form. Young lady ran off a receipt and said, Mr. Basham, until we mail you your hard copy driver's license to your address, which would be about 7 days or so, here's a receipt that you will use as proof of having a driver's license. So if I walked out of that DMV and if I went over to a company and I was hired maybe that day and completed the I-9, I could use that receipt for a List B document, driver's license. But remember, a receipt is temporary proof, just as it says in that first line. Going to that second comment there, make sure the receipt's issued by the originating agency. Meaning if it's a driver's license receipt, but on top of it says from the Library of Congress, Houston, we might have a problem, right? The only so I told you that receipt can be used as temporary proof, meaning 90 days from the date that I started working for pay, I need to show you my actual driver's license because that receipt is just temporary proof. The only exception to that 90-day rule, there it is in the middle of your screen. There's 2 exceptions there. Now look down toward the bottom, the last 2 comments there. A receipt employment authorization document, that EAD card, or for the renewal of an expiring EAD card is not acceptable. And you can never accept receipts if employment's going to last less than 3 business days. Copying documents. Hey, you can read what comes up here on the screen and remember this. You either copy everybody's documents or you don't copy any of them. And I mean all the documents. I don't mean, well, Dave, anybody that shows us a permanent resident card or a passport, we copy all of those, but we don't copy any others. No, you either copy everybody's documents or you don't copy them at all. You may say, well, Dave, we didn't, but we want to now. How would we do that without somebody filing a discrimination claim? Hey, you can simply do a memorandum for file, memorandum for record. Hey, effective here on 29 January, in regards to completion of the I-9, we will now start making copies of all documents where we previously didn't. That way, during an audit, if that ever comes into question, you've got that. Basically an SOP, a change in policy. Okay, let's see, we'll go on further. I am trying to go further. Are we moving? There we go. Hey, reader verification. Here's the last section on page 2. Look down below our comments there. You must re-verify an employee using Section 3 if their temporary employment authorization is expired, meaning like an individual showed you an EAD card stating they're authorized to work in the U.S. until this date. Well, once that date comes, you need to re-verify their employment eligibility, so you can either fill out Section 3 or you can complete a new I-9 on them. Just attach that old one as a historical document. Look at the second bullet down there at the bottom, comment. You may also complete Section 3 if you rehire an employee within 3 years of the date of the initial execution of the Form I-9. Why? Because you're going to retain that Form I-9 for a period of time. And look at that last comment. You can complete Section 3 to update the biographical information of an employee. Maybe an employee changed their name for whatever reason, got married, got divorced, just wanted to change their name. You may. There's nothing that states if an individual changes their name that you must update the I-9. But remember this, as with anything with the I-9, you better be uniform. Be uniform. If you change it for one person, anybody else that changes their name, you better change it with them. If not, hey, somebody can holler discrimination. Okay? Hey, we get a lot of questions in regards to that recertification block. So we came up with this chart about 2 years ago. Hey, under what circumstances do you not, what documents do you not have to re-verify? What are some of the exceptions and usually verify? Look here on the right-hand side. You don't have to re-verify that U.S. passport or passport card, a permanent resident card, or any List B documents. Once they expire, you don't have to call the individual back in and do Section 3. Yes, and when we say permanent resident cards there, I'm talking about, for those of you that work with a lot of them, we're talking about that 2-year conditional card or the permanent card. But there are two exceptions where you would have to re-verify a permanent resident card. And there they are there in the middle of the screen. And down below you see usually re-verify those list or A or C documents. Correcting a Form I-9. How would you correct the mistakes on the I-9? Hey, we encourage you to correct mistakes. Don't worry about, oh no, we got to throw that one away and do a new one. But how would you make corrections? Simply line through that item that needs to be corrected, off to the side, make the correction, initial and date. No strikeovers. Oh, watch this, I can turn that 7 into a 4. Don't do that, okay? Back up one slide if we can. Missing forms. Look down at the bottom. What do you do if you're missing a form? You hired 100 people here 2 years ago when you started your company. Here it is, 2 years later, you still have all 100 employees. You do a self-audit. You realize you're missing an I-9, and that's me. What do? Call me in today, just like today's my first day of employment. Have me complete the I-9. Have me complete Section 1. When I complete Section 1, have me put today's date. Don't have me backdate Section 1 dates to 2 years ago. Have me date it today. I show you those documents within 3 business days. You complete Section 2. You're going to put the actual date that I showed you those documents. Maybe I showed you a driver's license, social security card today as well. You completed Section 2. You're going to fill out today's date where you saw those documents, Section 2. But in that date where you said that I began working for pay, you're going to put that real date of 2 years ago. Now, granted, you're going, Dave, I'm going to get slapped on an audit because obviously the day you really started working for pay on that I-9, it's 2 years later that we're filling this out. Yes, you will. It's going to be a slap on the hand, but let me tell you, it's better off that way than getting caught backdating because you're talking serious problems then. And these auditors do this for a living. And how in this instance would they catch you? Because if you filled out this current I-9 and backdated it 2 years ago, that version wasn't even in existence 2 years ago. Okay? So let's look at retention and some storage real quick. Hey, you have to have an I-9 on file for all your current employees that are working, minus those that maybe have started work November 6, 1986 or earlier. Remember, they're grandfathered in. Secure the forms in a way that meets your business needs. We don't care if they're on-site or off-site, but if you get that notice from ICE for an inspection, you have to be able to provide them within a 3-day window. We recommend you put the I-9s and your copies together. You don't have to. We recommend. Why? Because if you're doing a self-audit or you get audited, you have those copies right there with the I-9. If not, then you got to try to marry everything together, okay? Sure, you have the I-9s only in an area where authorized personnel can see them. Don't put them in that 3-inch binder in the lunchroom. So retention, how long do you keep the I-9? Really, this slide should say, how long do you keep the I-9 after an individual has been fired or quit? Well, you can look at what I call the more complex reasoning up top, or what I call, and I'm from West Virginia, I like things basic, down below. Up top, you must retain the I-9 for an individual once they've been fired, or they quit, they're no longer working for you, either 3 years after the date you hired an employee or 1 year after the date the employee terminated. Whichever's latter. Look at the example down below. You'll use that formula to determine how long you need to retain that I-9 once an individual leaves. What do you do with those I-9s? Where do you retain them? Do you have to have a special folder for them? Can you keep them in the fold of your other I-9s? Whatever's your best business practice, that's your call. But that tells you how long you need to retain an I-9 after an individual has left your company. Hey, let's look at some basic resources. We'll wind down here now. Hey, I-9 Central. We started this website, this version here, about 2 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer. It's your one-stop shop in regards to everything on the I-9. It's available in English and or Spanish. Take a look at it. Some additional resources. Hey, here's our M274 handbook. It gives you our websites. Mergers and acquisitions. We talk about that. Click on that and go to that actual site. You've bought out a company. Maybe it's just 10 employees at other company. What do you do with those I-9s? Do you have them do a new I-9, or can you maintain their current I-9s and put them in your phone? We show examples of various acceptable documents. Here within about a year ago, we started 3 vignettes. I call them like your lunch bag sessions. Hey, how did Dave say we complete Section 1? Click on that Section 1 vignette. What about Section 2? Dave said, click on that. We have an I-9 webinar on demand as well. And with an outreach branch, there's about 12, 15 of us. Most of us are here in Washington, D.C. We have a handful that's in Lincoln, Nebraska or in Los Angeles. We provide webinars on a national platform and circuit such as this. Once again, shout out to I-9 Advantage. We also speak at conferences live. I sit on panels. So if you're interested in us giving a webinar for your company or for your association, all you have to do is reach out to me. Okay. Additionally, for those of you that are enrolled in E-Verify, if you're enrolled and you would like to use our logo, you can go onto our site and request the use of that. Here's our customer service number. Feel free to, obviously you have questions, you can reach out to I-9 Advantage, but our customer service number, you see the very first one, employer hotline number, 888-464-4218. You can call and talk to a live individual Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., your time zone, and ask any question on the I-9 or E-Verify. And with that, here's just a base disclaimer. This is just meant as an informational and instructional brief on the I-9. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Denise Ann so we can go ahead and close out with some Q&As and some other information. Thank you.
Wow. There is just so much going on with this 2-page form. I think anyone here on the call today, you know, Dave can understand the complexities of Form I-9. I thought that you did an amazing job of defining some of the ins and outs. Certainly, I would have to think that those of you on the call today may feel overwhelmed by trying to understand the Form I-9, maybe a bit uncertain about the accuracy of completion, especially if you have multiple sites or remote hiring, as Dave mentioned today on the call, and having to generate every I-9 within 72 hours in the event of an audit, maybe over-documentation, under-documentation, you know, making sure that all components of Section 1 and Section 2 are accurate. And that can definitely be a task. And no matter how many times organizations and their folks train people who are responsible for completing Form I-9, I guess this conversation we're having here today obviously is one that is much needed and ongoing. And so what I'd like to do is just start by saying briefly that we have the ability here to provide the guidance that's necessary with a 100% cloud-based Form I-9 and E-Verify solution. And so basically we have 3 things going on. We have the flawless I-9s every time. So if there's anyone at all on this call, as you're listening to Dave, you know, and you're processing paper today, and you're a bit concerned about your documentation being compliant, then this may be of interest to you. Maybe you've put it off or waited a bit, and now's the time here in 2015, kicking off the year, keeping your I-9s flawless every time. In addition, one of the things that I-9 Advantage does is they allow you to clean up the mess of the past, because it is not enough to move forward with a solution and getting I-9s right with accuracy, you know, as you proceed with all the new hires. When you are audited, they don't just come in and many times and say, we just want to look at those people you've hired in the last week. Many times they're going to want to see the sins of the past, so to speak. And so that can be a bit overwhelming. And if you're losing sleep about it, then you would have interest in I-9 Medic. It's a fully automated electronic remediation tool that can identify noncompliance and those 150-plus errors that are possible on Form I-9 for every version of I-9 since the very first version that Dave mentioned back in November of 1986. And finally, one of the other things that was discussed here earlier in the presentation was remote hiring. That still seems to be a struggle for many organizations, getting remote hire and I-9 processed properly when you don't have a physical brick-and-mortar location in that part of the country. Do know that there is a solution. It is fully automated. It allows the process to be compliant when processing folks and Form I-9 where you do not have a physical presence. And so as Dave was mentioning earlier, that you could choose to use, a librarian or a notary or another trusted resource, but in the end, your organization will always be held liable. So whether you're processing paper or electronically, that's true. But you're going to have greater advantages with accuracy and completion when you move into an electronic solution with error checking validation. So those are the three things that we wanted to highlight. Another thing to keep in mind, just in case you're concerned about security, if you're concerned about security, what you're going to find is that the solution meets level 3 security requirements because there is a lot of valuable information. We want to prevent tampering, fraud, and identity theft. So you're going to see that security will be another factor, and the solution is a secured space. So if you're worried about disaster recovery relief, tampering, fraud, identity theft, you have multiple sites. These documents may be in binders sitting on a shelf somewhere, free for the taking. You may want to rethink, and storage and retention and purging, all of those things are done electronically for you. And of course then, finally, we have a host of organizations that have stepped up to take a proactive approach, and they have realized the value of moving into an automated format and moving away from that paper process. However, if you continue to utilize paper, I think that, Mr. Basham has done an amazing job of giving you some heads up on what you need to do to ensure that your I-9 are compliant and accurate, and the seriousness of compliance and accuracy related to that document. So what we'd like to do is, there are some questions that have come in. We're happy to take some of your questions as well. And one of the questions I can answer right out of the gate before we push over to Dave is, will you receive a copy of this presentation? And that answer is yes. For those of you on the call today, we will be providing a copy of the presentation for you, and so you will get information relative to the presentation here provided by Mr. Basham and I-9 Advantage. So there is a question here that came in, Dave, in reference to Section 1. And they're asking if the boxes where it says like other names, apartment number, if there are boxes that aren't applicable to the person, like other names or apartment number, is the employee required to complete those boxes with an NA, like not applicable, if they do not apply?
Yeah, great question, Denise Ann. And that's where I want to steer everyone back to the instructions. I used the term homework a while ago because I want to stress that, as there's various blocks where you can leave blank or you can put NA. There's a area on page 2 where it says if you don't use that, you must put NA. But versus me saying, this block you do this, this block you do that, and individuals thinking, uh-oh, which block did they say? I want you to go run those off, and this is to all our listeners today. Run off the instruction pages of the I-9, and on the first 2 pages, it gives you block 1, what to fill out, block 2, and whatnot, and highlight those. I can't stress that enough.
So highlighting and the instructions with those key areas and following those instructions and doing that homework is really important. And so basically what I hear you saying is, while you have 9 pages here for Form I-9, that just because only 2 pages of Form I-9 are retained, it doesn't mean they still won't have to reference the remaining documents in the process of completion.
And that's exactly right.
So if an employee, so this question is interesting, if an employee is on a medical leave, Dave, and the employee's I-9 document, such as like a foreign passport, is about to expire, how should that be handled? So here they are, they're on a medical leave, they're tracking and managing their I-9s, it's about to expire. Do you have any ideas about what that would look like?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great question. We added, and first let me ask that question and put some additional information that was added in to the last version of the M274. Obviously, let's say I had surgery, I was in a bad accident, and I'm maybe in the hospital, or I'm at home for months on end, and in between time, maybe a document had expired, and you needed to update the I-9. I'm still on your company payroll. You're worried about, hey, if I get an audit, what's going to happen with me on that? Simply jot a note on that. If you have anything that will justify that, hey, this is why we haven't updated that, maybe I've sent in a doctor's note or medical note, and just put, individual is, out on medical leave for this period of time.
Okay, so basically, if the employee is on that medical leave, what I hear you saying is that the organization doesn't have to request the employee come in for re-verification while they're on that medical leave. Obviously, they might be unable to do so. So you're saying that as long as they make a notation or a memo to follow that I-9 in the event of an audit, that would allow auditors to know that this person was on a medical leave and that when they return, should they return, that things would be brought into compliance at that point in time. So they can honor the medical leave by simply attaching a note.
And that's exactly right, Denise Ann. And it's things like that, that even if you do multiple memorandums for file, in this instance we do this, in this instance we do that, whether you realize it or not, hey, you're building a compliance file or record in regards to how to handle the I-9. Okay. One thing I do want to add on that, if I can, Denise Ann, I think it's on, don't quote me the exact page, somewhere around page 22, 23, 24. Hey, if we have seasonal hires, do we have to use the same I-9? Do we have to do a new one, etc.? Go look at those pages. It talks about various instances, and then sometimes for some instances in regards to that medical leave, where you can complete a new I-9 or individual, or maybe you hire lifeguards each summer. Do we have to complete one if they're coming back? Look at that, and we added that in this last version of the M274.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is there are other things relative to like seasonal hires. Perhaps you have lifeguards or folks that might come in for a season and then they return again a following season. We see that a lot with events like holidays where retail locations will bring in seasonal hires to work like perfume counters or cosmetic counters or something just for the holidays like Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, etc. And you're saying that if they were to go to M274, page 22, 23, 24, somewhere in that vicinity, regarding completing new I-9s and what to do. Do you keep the I-9? There's a lot of good guidance in the M274 on those pages for folks that might find themselves in that situation on the call today.
Yes, and that's right on time on target there, Denise Ann. We actually use some instances, and the key terms that we use is there's a reasonable expectation of reemployment, bringing them back. Take a look at those. I can tell you that was probably one of the biggest things we added in M274 that answered a lot of those common questions that we received.
Wonderful. So those reasonable expectations are outlined. And finally, as I know we're coming up on 2 p.m. and we're hitting our hour mark, and once again, we certainly want to thank you for your guidance and expertise here today. I'm sure those folks who have been able to be on the call have found great value in your contribution for us here at I-9 Advantage and for those folks that have taken time out of their busy schedules to be on this webinar. The final question I have is, someone's saying if we don't keep copies of List A documents, but we do keep copies of B and C, is this considered discrimination? Meaning they must be keeping copies of Section 2 documentation for Form I-9, but they're only doing it for B and C and not A. So they're not keeping copies of List A, but they do keep copies of B and C, and they're concerned.
Yes, and they should be. That gets back to my statement. You either keep copies of every document that's shown you or none of them. Not just every B and C and not the A's, or not just the A's and not B and C's. All documents or none of them, where you're treading down that area of document discrimination.
Okay, so the bottom line is they need to perhaps do an internal audit and start looking at those Form I-9s where they weren't consistent in their documentation retention related to the Form I-9 for their employees. And so, and then finally, the final question, just as an overview, because we get this a lot, that remote hiring is so sketchy, and there are still organizations out there that are allowing employees to process remotely the Form I-9. However, they're allowing the employee to fax in copies of their Section 2 documents, and then let's say they're living in Idaho, and they fax in their documentation and FedEx over their, I-9 to the headquarters in Chicago, and then the HR representative is keying in, or kind of writing in the Section 2 information as if they were sitting with the employee present completing Section 2, when really it was a fax or copy, and wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
And that's a great example, and that really gets into those remote hires. And it's that instance that an example that you just gave, Denise Ann, that would be incorrect. It's the individual, once again, using that example that you hired me in Michigan, I'm here, let's say in D.C., maybe I went over here across the street to whoever company, and they completed Section 2. It's the individual that's actually putting their hands on my actual documents. The live documents that I'm letting them examine, it's that individual that needs to write that information in Section 2 and sign and date it. You can't make it. Now, that's not to say that that individual here, then after she or he does that, then makes a copy of my documents and then sends that with the completed I-9 back to the headquarters for you to then file. But it's the individual that actually sees Section 2 documents that needs to fill out Section 2. Very
good. So for those on the call today, if you are responsible for remote hiring and processing a Form I-9 remotely, then a person has to be physically present reviewing the actual documentation with the employee upon completion of Section 2. So if you're faxing, if you're using Skype, if you're using copies, then that would be something you would want to review because, as you've mentioned, a physical presence has to happen with that documentation with the employee, whomever that is, the librarian, the notary, whomever. They have to be physically present. So it can't be done remotely with a fax copy or video or some other form of not being physically with the employee is what I would,
and Denise,
would say.
Close this out with that. You're right on track. We're getting a lot of questions. What can they Skype the documents? And the way the regulation reads now is no. Okay.
No Skyping.
Like that, no Skyping.
Well, I want to thank you. I know our time is up, and I want to thank everyone else who remained on the call with us today. There will be additional details going out following this conversation here in the next coming days. So do keep your eyes open in your email inbox for that information. And we also post it on the i9advantage.com website as well. So you can go there to find other previous webinars that we've had with Dave. Dave has quite the following. I'm going to have to get some 8x10 glossies, Dave, that we can distribute out here at Marketing. You're becoming quite popular, so we want to thank you so much for that.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.